Summary of the Time Machine by H. G. Wells. The Time Machine is a science fiction book that imagines how society in Victorian England would be different in the year 802,701. At the beginning of the story, the time traveler, a famous scientist, is having a dinner party at his home. He is teaching his guests, including the person telling the story, about scientific and mathematical ideas that make time travel possible, just like space travel. His guests are wealthy British guys, like a doctor, a psychologist, a writer, and others. They don't believe what he says. The time traveler takes a small model of a machine into the living room to show that his ideas are true. The psychologist, who is always suspicious, pulls a switch, and the machine goes away. The time traveler then says that he is almost done building a machine that will take him through time that is the size of a person. He shows the guests the machine, but they are still not sure about it. The time traveler is not there to greet his guests at dinner the following week. He told them in a note to keep eating dinner if he was going to be late, and while they were still eating, the time traveler walks in looking messy and hurt. After getting clean, the time traveler agrees to tell his whole story as long as no one questions or disagrees with him. He is very tired. The time traveler says he finished his machine last week and went on a trip into the future. In the year 802,701, he found himself in the place where his lab used to be. It had been turned into a park with strange flowers and a big white sphinx figure. He saw small beings that looked like humans. Wells later tells us that these beings are called the Eloi, and he thought they were weak and not as smart as he thought people in the future would be. The time traveler continues his story. The beings are nice to him, and he starts to look around the scenery for hints about what happened. The time traveler thinks that this world is a communist paradise from the future where all social problems have been solved because there is no trouble, fear, or work. He thinks this is why the beings are weak and stupid. In a world of peace and plenty, there is no need for strength or knowledge. The time traveler is happy for a short time, but even though he thinks all of his problems have been solved, he is still upset that people in the future aren't better or more interested. The time traveler finds that his time machine is gone when he goes back to the yard where he arrived. He quickly loses control because he is angry, but then he realizes that the smart thing to do is to study this new world, figure out how it works, and then use what he has learned to get back to the time machine. Seeing lines in the grass makes him think that the machine is hidden behind a metal door in the base of the Sphinx statue. But when he tries to open it, it won't work. The time traveler starts to learn the very simple language of the Eloi and looks around the landscape. He finds a strange network of dry wells and towers that looks like a big underground air system. His eyes also fall on the Eloi, who never seem to work. Their shoes are brand new, and their clothes are not torn. This observation, along with the fact that he felt something touch him at night and caught a glimpse of a strange white animal, makes him realize that his ideal theory is not good enough. Later that day, he saves Eloi from drowning. Her name is Weena, and to show her appreciation, she starts following him around and giving him flowers. The time traveler sees that the Eloi are afraid and in pain when he leaves them by seeing how much Weena hurts when he does. He sees a white ape run down the tube of one of the wells he had seen before one morning while he is looking for a place to hide from the heat. The time traveler comes to the disgusting conclusion that the Morlocks, the ape-like beings, are also human relatives. This means that the Eloi are not the only species that has grown from humans from his time. The time traveler figures out that the Eloi and Morlocks became what they are because of how class was divided in Victorian England. The Eloi are the children and grandchildren of the British upper class, and the Morlocks are the children and grandchildren of the British poor. The time traveler thinks that the Eloi have been taking advantage of the Morlocks for hundreds of years and now have a comfortable life. The Morlocks, who work underground for the Eloi, can't stand being in the light anymore because their eyes have changed in a way that makes it hurt. The time traveler goes down into one of the wells because he thinks that learning about the Morlocks might help him find his time machine. When he gets there, he finds a room full of Morlocks and machines. He sees them eating meat, which tells him they eat meat like the Eloi do. Several Morlocks attack him, but he fights them off with matches and just barely gets away. He thinks the Morlocks are bad. The time traveler and Weena go to a big green building that the time traveler saw in the distance to look for tools to fight the Morlocks. As a nice thing to do, Weena puts flowers in the traveler's pocket on the way. And while he's walking, he realizes that the Morlocks eat the alloy, which is what makes Weena so scared. The trip takes 2 days, but the green building turns out to be an empty museum. He finds a box of matches that has been kept and an iron bar that he can use as a weapon inside. The goal for him and Weena is to get the time machine back from the Sphinx figure. In the park. Because the time traveler knows he has to stop somewhere for the night, he picks up sticks to build a fire that will keep them safe from Morlocks as they walk. As the time traveler walks through a thick forest, he feels the Morlocks grabbing at him. To protect them, he drops his firewood and lights it on fire. But outside the light sphere, the Morlocks come back, and Weena passes out. He or she starts a fire and then goes to sleep. When he wakes up, the fire is out, Weena is gone, and Morlocks are coming after him. He pushes them away with the iron bar and then sees that his fire had started a forest fire. The Morlocks are running away from the fire as it speeds toward him. The time traveler also runs away. He gets away, but Weena dies and his matchbox goes missing. He only has a few loose matches in his pocket to help him fix his time machine. The time traveler sleeps at the Sphinx again. His time machine is right there in front of him when he wakes up. The plates on the base are open. His iron bar falls away, and he steps inside the Sphinx. But as soon as he does, the panels shut, leaving him and the Morlocks in the dark. They also don't work because they are the type that need to be struck on the box. Just barely making it into the future, he fights them off long enough to get on his time machine and pull the button. After traveling through time, the time traveler ends up on a deserted beach full of scary giant crabs. As he moves farther into the future to get away from them, he sees that the sun is getting bigger, the earth is getting colder, and the air is getting thinner. The time traveler gets scared as signs of life fade and chooses to go back home. After pulling the switch, he returns to his dinner guests, dirty and hurt from his adventures. His guests don't believe him about his adventures, all they see is that his time machine is dirty and damaged, and he has Weena's strange flowers in his pocket, but the narrator is more likely to believe. The next day, when the storyteller comes back, the time traveler is getting ready for another trip. The time traveler tells the narrator to wait for him for half an hour, but the narrator says it's been 3 years and the narrator still hasn't come back.
About the author. Wells was born into a working-class family in Britain, and his schooling was all over the place. He read a lot, but because his father suffered an injury, Wells had to work in different jobs to help support the family instead of continuing with school. Wells hated his training as a draper, but it had a big impact on his lifelong political criticism of the unfair spread of wealth, which can be seen in The Time Machine. Wells was interested in both chemistry and biology, so he finally decided to work as an apprentice for a chemist. He also got into college and studied biology with Thomas Henry Huxley. Huxley, who was known as Darwin's bulldog, was a strong supporter of Darwin's theory of natural selection, which is also a big part of The Time Machine. Wells' time in college shaped his politics. He became very interested in socialism, his love of science, and his desire to write. By the end of his time in college, he was beginning to see writing as his main job. He wrote biology textbooks and short stories, and one of them, The Chronic Argonauts, was later turned into The Time Machine. It was Wells's stories that popularized ideas that are now commonplace in science fiction, for example, the idea of using a machine to move through time. He also wrote well-known realistic novels, non-fiction books about science and history, and political pamphlets. He is known as one of the fathers of science fiction. He was nominated 4 times for the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.